Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence for Just Ask. Today, our show is Accessible Housing, Detroit Lofts. Hurry back and join us. Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence for Just Ask. Today, our show is Accessible Housing, Detroit Lofts. And we have the president of Midtown Detroit Construction, Robert Slattery. Hi, Robert.
Good morning.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Good. Now, I know you prefer to be called Bob, so I'll start off with Bob. Now, let me ask you this, Bob. This is different for us, and it's about housing. So we know that a lot of times people are not sure about living in housing in the Detroit area, especially for persons with disabilities. Can you tell us a little bit about Midtown Construction and your position there?
Well, I'm the owner of Midtown Detroit Construction. I was started about 7 years ago. We do generally 1 or 2 projects a year. And we've always tried to include accessible housing in all of our projects.
Okay. Now, when you say accessible housing, what would accessible housing mean to a person with a disability?
One, you can get inside the structure. It's either by ramp or by stair lift or by wheelchair lift. And then a roll-in shower. Bathroom accessibility is so important. And then kitchen accessibility, more lower cabinets, plugs that are higher, switches that are lower.
Okay.
Just basics.
Okay. So those are some of the adequate things that are in their home anyway, but more so for a person with a disability, the ramp would be a more standard feature, and the bathroom widening and shower, things like that?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. The audience know that you're a wheelchair user. How did you become a wheelchair user, and how long?
In 1974, I was riding a bike on Chandler Park on the east side of Detroit, and a car deliberately ran me into a tree.
Oh, okay.
So I broke my back, and my femur became a paraplegic then.
Okay. Okay, so you've had a lot of different businesses, I know, and most of them have dealt with working with persons with disabilities. So tell us some of the businesses you've been involved in.
Well, when I was going to school, I got involved in selling medical equipment because we actually created a chair when chairs weighed 50 pounds or 55 pounds. There's hopefully some users who will remember that. And we created a wheelchair, and we marketed that first to people who played basketball and then to the general public. And then companies, small companies generally run by the disabled, started cropping up and building better products in what was Everest and Jennings wheelchairs at the time that were dominant in the market. So started selling medical supplies to get myself through school, and then ended up working for a medical company after school.
Okay. Now, do you think Detroit has changed a lot since your arrival here in '75?
Well, we were on a decline until about I don't know, 1994 when Dennis Archer was elected, and then things have been on the upside since then. We started, it was slow started. We created 88 units in the Cass Quarter area, what's now called Midtown, and now there's almost 3,300 units under construction in the same neighborhood. Okay.
I noticed you're based in Detroit. Is there a real love or connection for you in Detroit?
Well, unlike many developers, I actually I consider myself more of a community developer, where I planned around 7 or 8 blocks of the city, and I purchased some of the more distressed properties and turned them around and renovated the properties and put them back in the market.
Okay, okay. But how does one become aware that some of the units are handicap accessible?
Early on, that's been my greatest challenge with the internet now. I think reaching out to a larger audience is going to be a lot easier. We've noticed our sales and referrals have grown from the internet from 0 to about 50% of our referrals now in just the last 4 years. So reaching the disabled community, many who are computer users, is going to be a little bit easier than it had been.
Okay. Now, but if they're not computer users, is there any indication in your literature or on the property sites that could give a person the idea that that may be available to them?
We'll probably use some signage in terms of showing accessible signage on our construction signs. But I do think the internet's going to be the main driving in advertising. We do a small amount of print advertising in different weeklies like the Detroit Monitor, and we'll put the international symbol disabled in our advertising.
Because I think a lot of people are concerned with that when you become a person that's a disabled person, that housing is not a major issue, was high on the list after you have sustained the injury. If a person is born with a disability, some of the accommodations are made early on, but if a person should sustain a injury which they become disabled, the whole living arrangement starts to change. Do you find that when the living arrangement starts to change that you should move and find better and adequate housing, or should you just, equip the home that you have? What would you suggest?
It's always less expensive, usually, to equip the home that you're in. I've seen situations where people lived in tri-level homes, and I would suggest strongly then to move, because making a second-story flat accessible is very expensive, and making a tri-level home would be very expensive, where a ranch-style house would be so much better.
Okay. So. How about the fact that if you are moving, how would a person go about finding out where the accessible homes are? I know you said internet earlier, but do you find that a lot of construction companies or sites or managers have that ability to tell clients? Or
I think accessible housing in the broader construction market is really it's an underserved area. One of the projects I'm familiar with, Midtown Square, Maple and Coolidge, I believe.
Okay.
About 25 elevators were installed in residences, because it's not only the disabled, but elderly people are thinking about accommodating themselves as they grow old. They realize that if they're going to buy a 3-story home, they might as well make it accessible on the onset rather than waiting for a disability to happen.
Okay. Okay. Well, I tell you what, Bob, we're going to go to a commercial break, and we're going to come back with some more information about accessible housing, Detroit Lofts. We'll be right back.
Plastic ones last longer.
Pork bellies close steady due to speculation that demand for bacon-related products.
Read me this one, Daddy.
Okay, honey. The less art kids get, the more it shows. Are yours getting enough? Art. Ask for more. AmericansForTheArts.org.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. For those of you who are just now joining us, we have Accessible Housing, Detroit Lofts, with the president of Midtown Detroit Construction, Robert Slattery, known as Bob. Okay. Now, Bob, let me ask you this. A lot of times, what I'm finding out is that one of the reasons we have you here today is that a lot of people are asking, where do we find our housing at? What should we do to either stay where we are, or if we're going to go somewhere new? If we're driving down Woodward Avenue and we saw these beautiful developments, should they contact the construction site managers, or how should they do it to say, you know what, I really like to live here, what can I get? Or in other words, if a person usually gets in a package deal, a washer and dryer or something like that, can they exchange that for something else if they're a person with a disability? If they needed something else instead of the washer and dryer?
Well, in case of the washer and dryer, we put stackable units in most of our units, but we enlarge the laundry room and put side by side so somebody in a wheelchair could do their own laundry.
But should they let the developer know up front that these things are needed before they do the final sale or something?
I think the best is if you're looking for a new home, is to get in early during pre-construction where the
Okay.
developer has more flexibility to address your certain needs. Maybe a 36-inch door isn't wide enough for you. Maybe you need a 40-inch door. Maybe you need a little bit more room in the bathroom because your chair is extra long because you might be on a ventilator. Maybe you need to transfer sideways to the toilet, so you need a wider space next to the toilet to get onto the toilet. I mean, whenever you're involved earlier in the process is the better time.
Okay. And I would think that that's what we were concerned with, that, you know, people going in and seeing layouts and they're saying, well, I have to care for my mom who's elderly, or I have a disabled child, and I don't know if this is going to work. So they never really know to ask questions.
Well, as a wheelchair user, you know, you generally look for places without stairs or
Right.
ramping conditions. You look for accessible parking, and you try to be in generally a flat area where you don't have a lot of hills and terrain. Even if you can manage them when you're just wheeling, you got to remember when you go shopping, it makes it more difficult to get in and out of places, especially ramps.
Okay, okay. As I was always concerned that a lot of times our clientele may be looking elsewhere or trying to maintain where they are and skip out on the wonderful opportunities to move forward into upgrades or new housing developments, because one, like I said, there's no signs out to tell you that you can get this, or two, people just feel like when they see stairs or they see two level, 3 levels, that's not for them. Okay, so we actually want to know more about what should a person do in the fact that if they're trying to find housing. And we're trying to get our viewers to understand also that because you are a person with a disability doesn't mean you don't have an income. Society has gotten to the point where if it's a person with a disability, they have to be low income or they don't have an income. And I kind of find that hard to believe.
Yeah. I think there's, again, the market's underserved, and I think there's a lot of disabled people that do have jobs and they do have the income to buy the product, but the product's not available in the market.
Okay.
So, and it makes it hard for the disabled community to purchase accessible homes. Then.
Okay. Okay. Now, recently you took a trip to China. Okay. And I want you to tell the viewers and myself about your trip to China, because this is not just an ordinary trip to China, ladies and gentlemen. So I don't want everybody to say, well, what's the big deal about him going to China?
All right.
Tell us about your recent trip to China and what was it for?
Well, about 2 years ago, Bob Smith from Harrison Township went to China, and he had olfactory glia sheathing cells injected into his spinal cord, and it showed a lot of promise. When he returned, he had been, I think, 2 years post, and after the surgery showed additional recovery that he wasn't exhibiting before the surgery.
Now, Bob's a wheelchair user?
Yes,
Okay.
he's a quadriplegic.
Okay.
And that kind of inspired me. He was in the Detroit News and Detroit Free Press, I believe, and I read the article, and then I engaged him in conversation and really made the decision to go to China based on Bob's experience, and talked to Dr. Wong from, he came over for a visit and saw how Bob was doing, and met people at the Detroit Rehabilitation Institute of Michigan,
Okay.
Dr. Hinder, and I was basically inspired to go myself. I had been a wheelchair user, a paraplegic since 1974, and I thought I was financially able to afford this trip, and because it's experimental or considered experimental and it's out of the country, no insurer would cover it.
Okay. Now, is this under the stem cell research?
As a large umbrella, I would say it's the stem cell research that's the original work was actually done in Rutgers University in New Jersey, and Dr. Wong was a lab assistant there. Actually learned how to cultivate the cells from Dr. Wise Young at Rutgers.
Okay.
So there was a lot of foundation that was done here in the United States. There was, I think he's been studying the cell line for about 16 years. So that's what really kind of cemented it for me, that there was good foundation to what he was doing.
Okay.
With the
So
cells.
how have you benefited from since the operation?
Well, it's interesting. You know, when I landed in China, there was two doctors from the University of Miami there observing surgeries, And they were really pessimistic about the surgery and the outcomes. And they came there to observe and see what was really happening. Well, before I went into surgery, the doctors did several muscle tests, sensory tests to see what my pre-operation condition was, and they evaluated. And then just a general tone that I received from them when in conversation was negative. When I had the surgery and after the surgery, I showed an immediate improvement. I had like 30, if I was to quantify it, 30% of my sensory back in a day, 60% in 2 days, and by the third day my sensory returned to normal after 30 years. So it was pretty incredible. They, in fact, one of the last comments trying to remember his name offhand. One of the last comments the neurosurgeon had when he was leaving was, "I expect to see up and around."
Okay.
But 30 years post-injury, the muscles and nerves and everything, I wasn't expecting a full recovery after the surgery.
Okay, but everything looks good.
I actually when I was at my best, going to a spinal recovery center at the Rehab Institute of Michigan, I was walking 45 minutes on a weight-assisted treadmill, so that's pretty good.
That's pretty exciting too.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It was.
All right. Well, I know a lot of people are concerned about the stem cell research and the outcomes and the variations of different types of surgery that are assisting spinal cord injury. So I know that one is high on the list of being shot down by the president, but others are saying give it a shot.
The Senate Majority Leader Fritsch broke ranks with President Bush, and for good cause. A lot of exciting discoveries are being made around the globe, and it was time to bring the research home because really I think the United States was leading in many ways this area of research, and then without funding, because much of our medical advances are through our public health funding, felt it was necessary, for those advances to occur, for stem cells to be allowed to, be studied. Not just the limited lines that President Bush got behind several years ago, but a general more more general exposure to the lines.
Okay, well, it seemed like it's working. Okay.
Yeah, the Koreans have showed the most promise, and University of Wisconsin researchers, and I think Harvard recently announced that they had a breakthrough also, but it's exploding, and we're going to see good things from it.
Okay. Well, we're going to be watching you. Let's take a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Hey there. Hi! I haven't seen you before.
Yeah, I just moved here. I'm new. Wanna hang out or something? 'Cause I have a feeling we're gonna be best friends.
Things can get pretty ugly when you're bored. In an after-school program, you can find something way better to do.
And welcome back to the show. For those of you who are just now joining us, we're in the last half of Accessible Housing Detroit Live with Robert Slattery of Midtown Detroit Construction. Now, Bob, you know what? I know somebody probably sat back and wanted to know, what would you suggest or what recommendations would you make for a person who has a spinal cord injury in reference to having this type of surgery?
Well, I think in the United States they're going to adopt in the next several years some of the procedures that are being done around the world right now. The healthcare facilities in China are a little bit raw right now, and I would, just on the air of caution and just possibly suggest waiting for some of the procedures. I would watch the political climate and see if the government gets behind it. Otherwise, there's alternatives coming up every day. I mean, there's 7 countries involved in stem cell research.
Okay.
So there's going to be more programs or more procedures available to us in the next few years. And even though I went to China, it doesn't preclude me from doing additional procedures in the future.
Okay, so people are actually going outside of this, outside the United States, in search of. So they should just go ahead and, for now, investigate the different countries, or better yet, just wait until we catch
Well, it
on?
depends if if you're financially able to, travel. The whole research has to be pushed ahead, and the only way to do that is perform the procedures and see outcomes. And then Dr. Wise Young from Rutgers believes that there's going to be coupling of different procedures done. So I think in the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years, I think there's going to be a lot of changes occurring, a lot of coupling of different procedures that are being done in different countries right now that are going to be brought together and done possibly here.
Okay. Well, that's good news to know. Now, before we close up, you know what? We're talking about accessible housing, Detroit lofts. How are these lofts being done?
Well, our project we're working on right now is Willie's Overland, and that's going to be my next really accessible housing, which is going to have indoor parking and elevator access to different floors. So we're going to have basically a 5-story project, and we're going to develop some accessible units and see if there's a market and try to get on the website and do an intelligence job in terms of putting crawlers out there, so if somebody punches in accessible housing, that will be coming up on the first page of searches. Yeah.
Well, see, I know our audience wants to hear that.
Yeah.
Like I said before, people with disabilities do have incomes, and they want to live wherever they can as well as anyone else, and they want to have the opportunities to have some of the things that they feel are a need in their home.
Well, you can always call if you like a given area, not only Detroit, but if you're looking at condominiums being built in, say, Sterling Heights, you can call the developer and ask him if he would be interested in doing some modifications to better suit your lifestyle and needs.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it yourself from Mr. Slattery that you can call the developers and ask the developers for some of the accommodations if they're willing to make those, correct?
Right.
Okay.
But the educated consumer knowing your own needs is so important.
Okay. And that's key. So I'm glad you said that because, like I said, we want to make sure that our viewers know that you have the opportunity to enjoy some of the beautiful constructions that's coming up in Michigan, as well as if you have to stay in your own home or choose to stay in your own home, you still can use some of the accommodations in your own home as well.
And the other thing that people forget too is even the disabled community is plan ahead for possibly needing more assistance or more, say, a bathroom lift, where right now you can transfer onto the toilet. Maybe in the future we won't be able to. You'll need a lift, so you have to accommodate for the changes in your lifestyle that's going to occur as you age.
That's true. I mean, because half of our population is of a senior nature, and there's more seniors living now, quiet as kept, longer rather, as quiet as kept, and people are not looking at that, then there's quite a few of the population for disabled, in my opinion, is growing as well, especially due to the war. And with the war as it is, our population of disabled is doubling, and at that point, when the soldiers come home and their homes have to be modified, there should be changes made. And so really we like to thank you for coming, because we do know that our clientele will know now that, hey, we can call the developers and ask them for assistance instead of just doing a drive-by and saying, I wish I could live there.
Yeah, early in a construction project, you can ask the developer to ramp the home. You can ask them for a bigger bathroom, larger closets with lower bars. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done early.
Okay, we're going to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to swing over to our community news with Joe Zenuegas, family care foster worker for Macomb Oakland Regional Center.
Thanks, Marcia. And you're right. The population of people who are getting older and people who have disabilities is getting much bigger in Michigan. In fact, many of them, because of the lack of resources that they have, are now finding themselves swelling the rolls of Medicaid. And one of the updates I wanted to give you was on what's happening with a 2-year-old budget cut with the state of Michigan's Medicaid program for dental services. So many people coming in right now on Medicaid, which is over 600,000 adults over the age of 21, this is the budget cut that affects them. It hasn't affected children yet directly. It has a more indirect effect. So if you or a loved one or a friend, and you probably do have someone you know is affected by this, are interested in this, you might want to listen for just a moment, because this is going to affect people in your life. It's so widespread. Again, 600,000 people, they've had their dental services cut. So in the past, Medicaid under the state of Michigan was covered dental care was covered with preventive care and restorative care. So you could get x-rays, cavities filled, your teeth cleaned twice a year, and some other services that would kind of keep you in the ballpark of having some decent oral hygiene. But right now, that's all changed. 2 years ago, when the budget was cut, about $12 million, the care was taken away and only emergency care was offered. So now if you go into a hospital, you have to go into a hospital, an emergency care setting, to have your teeth worked on. And they really won't work on your teeth. Your teeth will be extracted if you have a problem. So this poses a great hardship to many individuals who are used to having some sort of oral care, and now we're finding that many are swelling the rolls of Detroit Receiving Hospital's emergency department, some of the outer lying hospitals like Ann Arbor, the teaching school there, other places throughout the state, the clinics, adult Medicaid clinics, people are still trying to get in, but they're not offering the free services. They're having to pay some money, and that's taking money away from other things that people need, such as medications and food. So a lot of people are just going without, and our facilities are getting overwhelmed. So what's happened now in Michigan is there's been a strong push with the legislators to try to get some of this funding restored, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this next September. It probably won't. There is not enough support with it within the legislators and also with the governor. What other individuals are doing are trying to get family members to help support them, and some are having fundraisers, some are tying with organizations to have fundraisers to raise just a little bit of money so they can at least get some cleanings and maybe some basic exams. Some programs have started what's called an Adopt a Smile program, which they're asking dentists to volunteer to adopt one person with a developmental disability, or actually any kind of disability, a dentist who might, out of the goodness of their heart, take in somebody and do some basic cleanings, x-rays, and maybe do some work if that individual needs it. Maybe adopt them for life if this cut stands. People ask, what can they do to help loved ones or family members? Basically, it's advocating with your elected representatives who are making decisions on the budget right now, and hopefully will restore it, but that's, again, a big question mark come this fall. So I just wanted to say a number of things are happening in this, and we'll update you as time goes on on what's happening for 600,000 people with disabilities and people who are seniors. Thanks, Marcia.
Thank you, Joe. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, I'm your host, Marcia Florence for Just Ask. Keep in mind, our community news segment is always brought to you by one of our dear friends and volunteers who want to give you insight on what's going on in the community. If you have a question or a comment, what do I always say? Don't be afraid to ask. Or if you have a general question, don't be afraid to ask that either. Keep in mind that we do have a website, that's justastalkshow.org, as well as our phone number, 248-988-0250. Please drop us a line, let us know what you think, or if you have a show idea for us, we'd be more than happy. Well, I'm your host, Marcia Florence for Just Ask. What do I always say? If you know someone with a disability, or if you just have a general question, don't be afraid to ask, just ask. I'm your host. Thank you.